Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Jason X from 2002. Now, this is continuing my series where every Friday the 13th I review a different Friday the 13th film, and this is the 10th entry in the Friday the 13th franchise, Jason X. It's actually the first Friday the 13th film to not have Friday or Friday the 13th part whatever in the title. One of the things with the Friday the 13th series is it was really made to be a roller coaster ride. It was made to be fun, a fun horror movie for the audience, even from the first Friday the 13th movie. That was the intention. They knew from the onset they were a Halloween ripoff. They kind of just ignored trying to make a horror movie that was anything but just a fun thrill ride. And a lot of these sequels, when you get these ridiculous ideas, adhere to that philosophy where you take a ridiculous idea and you just try to have fun with it. And this is the movie where Jason goes to space. Hearing the idea of Jason X, you just start laughing. That's kind of part of the fun of this one, but it almost gets the idea of doing a concept with a Friday the 13th film better than any of the other ones that came up with ridiculous concepts. A lot of them have ridiculous concepts, but after there was the final Friday, it kind of goes into this limbo where everyone has to have a new spin on it, whether it's Jason's not in this one, even though he kind of was, whether it's kind of a funnier kind of Scream type send up where he comes back, whether it was the psychic kid or Jason Takes Manhattan or even Jason Goes to Hell. They all had an angle, and this is a tongue-in-cheek angle. The writer of this film, Todd Farmer, this is the only idea apparently he pitched, and it's very influenced by Alien, but it's also very tongue-in-cheek and ridiculous. You're not gonna want to see this for anything other than it's ridiculous. Like, have we really gone this far? It's almost like looking at humanity and realizing like we have gone too far. This is the point of no return for humanity. And Jason X was certainly that moment for the Friday the 13th films. For a lot of people, Roger Ebert gave it a really terrible review. A lot of people gave it bad reviews, but I think this movie's a little funnier than that, a little more clever than that. I don't think it's an amazing movie, but it's a lot more inspired than I'd say the last couple entries in the Friday the 13th franchise. Certainly the last two, because it kind of takes advantage of the fact that it's like, well, what else could we possibly do with it and not mess up the continuity for Freddy vs. Jason? And they came up with, let's have Jason kill people in a space station. Let's not only take him to space, but let's also make fun of the fact that we're at this point. They do a pretty good job of adhering to that and realizing the kind of fun you can have with the point you're at in the Friday the 13th franchise. Jason is in the Crystal Lake Research Lab in 2008, and this is actually 5 years after when Freddy vs. Jason takes place, and Jason has been captured by the government, and they've tried to execute him several times. They decide they're just going to freeze him because he can't die, but of course someone wants to come in and transport him and research him and understand how he doesn't die because there's big money in it. And a doctor comes in, played by David Cronenberg. Yes, that David Cronenberg has a cameo in Jason X. They try to move him to a new location, but then when he starts killing people, they send him down to be cryogenically frozen, and then while he is about to be, he stabs this girl, and the cryogenics release from the cabin, freezing both him and this girl. And then in 2455, a spaceship comes down to Earth and goes within the lab and finds both Jason and this girl who have been cryogenically frozen, take them back to their spaceship, and since Earth has been totally ruined and destroyed, they're going back to Earth 2, and they're taking Jason and this girl there, and they've woken both of them up, even though it is 445 years in the future in 2455. And then one of the doctors mentions that they have Jason Voorhees, and someone brings up that he's a famous killer and people would pay big money for him. And so he's driving them back to Earth 2 to show off these people who have been frozen for 400 years and hopefully sell Jason to the highest bidder. But unfortunately, Jason has other plans as he goes through the ship and starts killing people off one by one, mostly because they're having sex, but also because he's Jason and he kills people and stuff. And they have to find a way to either get him off the ship or save themselves before he kills everyone on board. The reason this movie even exists is because Sean S. Cunningham, who had taken control of the Friday the 13th franchise, when New Line had taken control of it, he had become kind of the main producer, didn't like how long it was taking to make Freddy vs. Jason. And yes, they were still trying to make Freddy vs. Jason. It took forever. And he wanted to make another Friday the 13th film to keep Friday the 13th within the public consciousness. But then it got delayed a lot, and I think for 2 years, so it ended up actually coming out a year before Freddy vs. Jason. And the funny thing about Jason X is it's kind of a precursor to what Snakes on a Plane would do, or Machete. Even a film Todd Farmer, who wrote this film, also wrote Drive Angry. Those kind of tongue-in-cheek, like made-to-be cult movie type of movies. And Jason X definitely is within that. It owns its ridiculous premise as being very tongue-in-cheek, more tongue-in-cheek than any Friday the 13th movie has done before. And it kind of makes sense that someone would make one of those type of movies with Friday the 13th, much like how Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, was a precursor to what would happen with Scream and all of that in the 90s. Jason X is kind of a precursor to the tongue-in-cheek, made-to-be cult movie type of Hollywood movies that would happen so much throughout a lot of the 2000s, or the later 2000s, really. I know it had been delayed enough at a certain point, but if it had actually came out now on Sci-Fi Channel, I actually think it would be a big hit. And that's kind of where those tongue-in-cheek Snakes on a Plane movies have gone. They've become like Sharknado and stuff. And Jason X is within that kind of mode, but it's before all of that. You kind of have to give it credit for its director, Jim Isaac, and its writer, Todd Farmer, for doing that. The whole idea is ridiculous, and it's like they know pushing the franchise into so far away from Freddy vs. Jason that it's not interfering with the continuity, that it's not going to be confusing. There's a part where Jason's in this kind of simulator where it looks like Camp Crystal Lake, and they have these two girls who are like, let's smoke some pot, let's drink some beer, let's have premarital sex. It's like such a joke on the Friday the 13th films. It's like he definitely gets into the fact that this is how ridiculous it's gotten with these films. And other franchises like Jaws, for example, thought about doing that. And this is kind of the closest you could do. It's not a straight out like silly comedy. It's not as pronounced in what it's doing comedically. I do think sometimes it does kind of that annoying, stupid 90s humor. Even though I grew up in the 90s, sometimes I do get sick of the dialogue and things people thought were popular at the time. Jason X has a lot of that. Most of the Friday the 13th films are 80s movies. Jason X is very much like a late 90s film. It came out in 2002, but it was made in the 90s. I will say I respect, like, I think the film cost about $11 to $15 million, and it actually looks pretty good. The special effects are pretty low rent and shitty, and it's pretty ridiculous how bad the special effects look and how unrealistic the whole space. I mean, it looks like they existed entirely on a green screen, and I don't even know how they made most of the ship stuff with the budget they had, but they managed to actually kind of get it to work. It does look like Stargate quality kind of spaceship kind of crap, and I think I'm being nice about that. I'm kind of impressed that they could even make a space movie for that low amount of money. It does kind of have a very much a TV movie qualityness to it. Apparently they shot it on high def, and you can really tell because high def in the 90s was not what it is now. I did like the Cronenberg cameo. Apparently the director, Jim Isaac, worked with Cronenberg, or I think a producer, Noel Cunningham, did, who is Shaughnessy Cunningham's son. I'm not sure, but somebody knew Cronenberg and got him in here. It would have been nicer if he would have directed it, but I'm sure Cronenberg had better things to do. I think Jason X really works when it realizes how stupid it is. This does actually have the most kills of any Friday the 13th film, but I don't think the kills are as good or as memorable. There's one where a guy falls on kind of like a giant screw and like twirls around. That one was actually pretty good. And the one where the girl's face freezes in cryogenics and then he smashes it, which apparently they tried to bust on Mythbusters. When I saw that, I was not thinking about its realism. Nothing about Jason X is meant to be realistic or meant to be someone who thought they were making more than they really were. And you know, Roger Ebert did, like, I think said the movie sucked on so many levels, and a lot of critics in America hated it. Critics in England kind of almost overliked it. I probably haven't liked a Friday the 13th film as much as this since probably New Blood. I didn't like Takes Manhattan that much, or Jason Goes to Hell, and I actually think this appears to the goofy premise Friday the 13th film idea better than any of them have. It goes off such an outlandish cliff. It is certainly a silly Friday the 13th film, and it really, really goes into that. But I think the thing with Jason X, you have to understand the kind of films the Friday the 13th films are, and they're ridiculous thrill rides. The genius of it is that it kind of saw this made-to-be cult films happening before it really happened, and I think that's actually very smart. And had a Jason X been made post Snakes on a Plane, it probably would have done a lot better. Critics probably would have gotten it a lot more. There are critics who didn't get the Snakes on a Plane stuff either. Not that any of that was really that good, and this isn't really that good. There are parts that kind of bored me me, but there are other parts that made me laugh, and I like the references. You kind of have to be in the know to get it, and I think a lot of those people weren't. This is also before Adult Swim type of humor, which I think this film has a lot of. It's a ridiculous Friday the 13th movie that owns its ridiculousness more than any of them really have. I always wanted Takes Manhattan to do that, but Takes Manhattan is so cheap and on that cruise ship. That one really should just be called Love Boat with Jason or something. That one never really got into it as much. This one kind of gets into it a little bit more and makes it a more enjoyable movie, but it's still like kind of a dumb horror movie. I kind of am giving it more credit just for existing on the kind of tongue-in-cheekness made to be cult movie kind ofness that is going on with it, and how it was kind of ahead of its time in an odd sort of dumb way. Going into space usually means a horror movie is just churning out sequels because they know they can make some money, and that's really what this film was doing. But it's almost like when it's knowingly doing it, it's this weird postmodern self-awareness. But I kind of love Jason X for doing that. It is kind of the ridiculous Friday the 13th movie you really want it to be, and it gets into that. Even if it is still a Friday the 13th movie, it's one that at least knows it is. That's at least a fun thing to watch, and it kind of at least semi-warrants the franchise still being around. It at least gives you some hope by its self-aware quality about its crappiness. So if you have seen Jason X and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And the next film in my Friday the 13th review series will be on Friday, November 13th, 2015, and that will actually be Freddy vs. Jason, and I hope to see you then. Thank you very much for watching. If you've watched a lot of these, then thank you for keeping up with these, and check out my Friday the 13th review playlist, which will have an annotation below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.